This is E&P Reports, a vodcast from Editor and Publisher magazine, the authoritative voice of news media since 1884, serving newspapers, broadcast, digital, and all forms of news publishing.
And greetings once again, Mike Blinder, publisher, E&P Magazine. Housekeeping first. If you are listening to this program on a podcast channel, we urge you to follow us. Watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button below. Smash the bell to the right. You'll get an update each and every time. We upload this weekly vodcast series, E&P Reports. Jim, do you think the word vodcast can be played in Scrabble legally?
I don't know, Mike. I've never been a big fan of that word, but yeah, I guess all things are fair.
I used to call it a podcast with video, and someone corrected me and said it was a vodcast. And I think that word shows up on the internet. I don't think it's legally yet. I don't know why. Jim Brown, an old friend, president of Borrell Associates, is joining our program today. Jim, you and I go way back. Jim, your background is in the newspaper industry. You spent years at the Virginia Pilot in Norfolk on the sales side. Am I correct, sir?
I did, yeah, 21 years or so. Started my career in the local sales department, calling on local retailers, eventually moved into the real estate department. And then, in the late 90s, when this new internet thing came along, I had the opportunity to get involved with that. So that's been a very formative part of my career.
You and I have known each other through many of those years, but today you are running Borrell Associates as president. For those of you that live under a rock, just being sarcastic and kidding, Borrell Associates is the leading research company in the media industry, in my humble opinion, that follows advertising dollars. One of the only. Many research companies follow audience. You guys actually assess the local business community all over the United States and try to figure out, I always say it's like two things, but you break it down so well. What are you currently buying in media, and what do you plan to buy in media? Pretty much breaks down to that, right? So we can see the current lay of the land and try to project what they want in the future. Am I kind of summing that up?
You are, Mike, and I'm glad you said it that way. What we like to do is look at how much those businesses, those local businesses, are spending on different types of media. Some research companies look at it from the other side. How much are the media companies making? And instead, we look at it from a local level. How much are they spending on different types of media, and how that's changing and how we expect that to change over the coming years.
And this is the 14th year you've done what's called the Local Advertising Survey, and we're honored to have you on board because you just issued the Q2 update, correct? Quarter 2 of this year, and that's what we're going to break down. Do I have that right?
Yeah. In fact, we're now doing these surveys twice a year, and as you said, we've been doing them for quite some time. I call these local advertiser surveys, not small business surveys, because the nature of how we do this. Mike, we send the survey out through Borrell's media partners, right? So TV stations, radio groups, newspapers, direct mail companies around the country send this survey to their clients, who are advertisers. These are people who actually spend money on advertising and marketing. And we get amazing insights. We ask them lots of questions about what they plan to do, where they're spending their money, where they're getting results, and so forth. So it is just one of many different sources we use to look at how much is being spent in a local market. And it's important to understand when we talk local, we're looking at all the businesses in the market, how many businesses there are of each type, of each size. And that survey serves to augment the research that we do and understand what are they saying from the local ground level.
Well, if you're curious about where local dollars are heading, at least those ad dollars, stick around. We'll get to the breakdown on the backside of this message.
This episode of E&P Reports is exclusively sponsored by Blocks Digital, formerly Town News. Even though the name has changed, their commitment to the media industry is as strong as ever. Blocks Digital is now even better positioned to deliver integrated solutions like content management, audience development, advertising revenue, video management, and more. Join the over 2,000 news publishers worldwide that power their ongoing digital transformation with Blocks Digital, serving over 141 million monthly users who view over 6.5 billion pages of content each year. You can trust Blocks Digital to empower you, to connect you at scale. with the community you need to reach. Blocks Digital, formerly Town News, now reimagined to help meet the news publishing challenges of tomorrow and beyond. Learn more at blocksdigital.com.
All right, Jim. I am always fascinated when I go over the first number, which is types of media used. Now, I'm an old radio guy. Do you remember my background? I have a degree in marine biology from GW, and I always wanted to be a DJ. And I begged and screamed at a local radio station, an AM in Washington, D.C., WEAM. I was on the WEAM team as swing shift and overnights while I was in my senior year of college. And I would never got that talented. So I could never make big money. And I eventually went into sales. And before I knew it, I was managing radio stations. But radio is the number one type of media used. I find that fascinating because I don't believe it. I mean, you basically show 78% of the respondents across the country are still using AM and FM broadcast radio. Is that correct?
Yeah. The thing is, number one, they constitute one of the largest local sales forces out there, Mike. Right. It used to be newspapers that dominated it. In any market, there are probably more radio sales reps than any other media out there. So that alone drives a lot of it. The second thing is, it's affordable. Many of those advertisers who would love to be on TV, who would love to do other types of advertising, they can afford to buy radio. The other thing I'd say about it is radio folks are really creative, right? They've got events, they've got all kinds of things that drive that. So I think it's no surprise when you look at it from that lens that, yeah, it's pretty popular.
I feel like I set you up, Vanna, to swing the letter. I was waiting for you to say that. I was a radio sales rep. We fought for every dollar. And you got to be creative in radio. You're not selling a commercial. You're selling a campaign, and you're building things around it, and you're always speccing, which I could go on and on. So you're right. There are more feet on the street. That can sometimes equal, right, more money, period, exclamation point.
It is. And, I'll say this, one of the things I see about the folks in radio that I really admire with that creativity is their ability to sort of, kind of play that endorsement card, right? They understand those players who are out there when they've got a local personality who can speak to, hey, this is the eye surgery center I used. I think that really, it's very local, right? It feels very local to people. They know this person, they connect with them. And that connection, I think, really plays well with local advertisers.
Okay, so let's take it to the next level. Radio is your number one legacy media. That comes in at 78%. I'm just going to break down legacy media first. You got broadcast TV at 72%. Newspapers are still holding their own at 1 out of 2. 52% of your respondents are still buying print newspapers. Did that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me when you think about some of those categories where, having a print ad still is a mainstay to them, right? The permanence of it, a coupon, that type of thing. But this doesn't speak to the amount of money they spend, right? So they're there, they may be buying it, but it doesn't mean they're in the paper on a regular basis. It's many times it's sales events, it's event-driven advertising medium for them now.
All right. So basically, then, you got social media, which is still strong. People are still buying ads on websites, search engine marketing, but OTT is what stuck out to me. For those of you who don't understand, OTT are those commercials you see on Hulu or whatever, streaming you're currently doing when you're holding that little, Fire Stick in your hand and you're seeing broadcast commercials between your programming. That is now a sophisticated type of sales that many legacy media companies are selling. That growth is huge. Am I correct, sir?
It is growth. It is big. In fact, we're still seeing, as big as it is, continued growth as much as 9% next year. And you nailed it, Mike, because it's not just television folks selling it, right? Radio reps are selling it. Newspaper folks are selling it. So I think what's happened as a, format, as opposed to thinking of it as a media type, it's a great way to tell a story. And now that the cost of production has come down, then lots of advertisers are attracted to that.
But deep in your research, there's an oxymoron. Radio is selling it at their own expense because the number one media that seems to be shaved by OTT, at least legacy media, seems to be radio. Am I right?
You got it. That's right. Look, advertisers who advertise in radio, as we discussed earlier, don't necessarily have the largest budgets. Many of them would love to be on television, can't
Right.
afford it. So the fact that they're buying it and will buy it from somebody, I think radio folks who are smart are jumping on that and they're offering that. Is it coming at the expense of radio? It may, but if it comes at the expense of radio, it might as well be coming from that radio seller, right?
You guys were the ones that kind of turned the industry into content marketing. I mean, there's a lot of people that have been pushing for it, but you did a groundbreaking report a couple of years ago that claimed that small businesses needed to tell their stories. All businesses. Let me take that back, because you even found that big manufacturers in towns that don't care about local audience need content now. And content marketing is strong. Is that still growing? I see that still high on your list as a spending category. And you define that as building stories, right? Where the business is paying someone to write content for them. Is that, do I have that right?
Yeah, oftentimes it is. And look, we know this, the newspaper industry knows it, we in media know it. You got to feed that beast. It's a costly thing and it can take a lot of time to create that content. So look, I think that continues to be an opportunity. And I think for local media sellers, it's all about telling that story, and where that content comes from might be you. You might generate it on their behalf, or they may be supplying that to you. Yeah, a lot of them are hiring freelancers. There are a lot of, let's face it, unemployed newspaper folks who are out there doing stories, right? I see it all the time. One of my former colleagues at the newspaper, who was a sports writer for many years, went to work for a local hospital group, and he kept up writing lots of content for them. So, yeah.
We're going to show some of these slides embedded. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, please head back to editorandpublisher.com/vodcasts. And Jim's going to give me the permission to show some of this data, but here's what I saw. And I think this is fascinating. 5 years ago, when I was looking at the study, 72% of your respondents called themselves novices. This is when I was at miniature conventions for years. Gordon Borrell, the CEO, the founder of Borrell Associates, used to always talk about Daryl in the garage, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, he always said, and Daryl's out there. I mean, Daryl's a wonderful name if you name your kid Daryl. He always picked on that name as the geek or the nerd. Was the person that had no idea, was just kind of advising. But now, this is 5 years later, only half of your respondents call themselves novices now. They actually think, or they know they're smarter at marketing. And you have an increased knowledge base now in the local advertising community. Do I have that right?
Well, yeah, Mike, it's driven, our indication of whether they're an expert or a novice or an apprentice really has to do with how long they've been doing the activity of advertising and marketing. And how much that time they spend doing it and how long they've been doing it, right? Well, they've been doing it longer. They're spending more and more time on it. And I think it's another thing too. Some of those respondents in the survey, there are companies who have hired experts. It's gotten so complicated now. It's not as simple as it used to be. I'll give you a good example. A good friend of mine who's an attorney in Norfolk, bright guy. I met him for the first time, Mike, at an American Marketing Association meeting, right? And I was like, that's interesting, to have an attorney show up at these meetings, but he loved marketing and he came to those meetings all the time. But he has since hired, a woman who's in her probably early 40s, really bright, understands media and can dedicate the time to it. So in some cases, the companies, the people who've been doing this, they brought them in-house. And so you've got these very smart, much more sophisticated, not really so much novices. And you're probably going to mention this, but I might steal the thunder. Here's what's interesting about those folks. Everything's moved digital, right?
Right.
Well, some of those more sophisticated marketers, they actually lean more into some of the traditional media types. They understand the role that media types play in different formats. So they don't move all that money into digital. They understand, hey, there's a place for radio. There's a place for newspaper in my budget. So when we look at those novices versus those who are more experts, people have been spending a lot more time on this, Mike, they're much more likely to buy traditional media.
And this is fascinating because you started to show this trend a few years ago, and some thought it was a blip. Let me get this straight. I mean, as people were buying digital, I remember this coming out a couple of years ago, they were blending it more with legacy. So if anyone out there thinks they should not be fluent in the multimedia world and selling some digital services, you need to package them. Am I right? You need to have all the tools in your toolbox, correct?
Yeah, and I would say one of the reasons for that, Mike, is another phenomenon, which is, there are more and more choices, right? The capacity that a local business owner has to work with multiple companies on their advertising, it's diminishing. It's,
of course,
they're using fewer and fewer media partners out there. What that also means is those that they're using are serving more of their needs, right? They're offering more robust product lines. So I think if you're a local media seller today, you've got to have multiple products in your arsenal, right? And you have to know how they work together.
And I love when you guys go beyond just asking what media you're buying, how much you're spending. You start asking, and what do you think? What do you think of the reps? What would you like a rep to do to be better?
Right.
And what came out at me, and I've been seeing it over the years, and it's getting stronger and stronger, is creativity. So here's what I'm seeing, because I always try to look at these things at 20,000 feet. I don't like to get in the weeds, because sales is sales. What I'm seeing, it's getting back to the fact that, okay, 2008, we had a major recession hit everybody, and that's when Groupon grew, right? Everything was bribing. I mean, the only way you're going to get a new customer was bribe, deal. Now it looks like TOMA is back. For those who don't know that acronym, top of mind awareness, branding is back. We're moving from bribing to including branding again, which means there's nothing wrong with selling an advertiser an ongoing campaign that raises their top of mind awareness. Am I correct, sir?
Yeah, I think that's true, Mike. And look, I guess when I think about it from that perspective, it really has to do with helping that business be more competitive.
Right.
If there's one thing that a local sales rep should be doing is talking about that competitive landscape and how are you going to win? How I'm going to help you win. When somebody is in the market for a new vet, right? Their new puppy is sick and they need to bring it in or needs to get checked. Who are they going to turn to? Is it somebody they're already aware of, somebody who's local, somebody's already top of mind, who they see getting good reviews out there? Or is it somebody they've never heard of? So yes, that creativity and being able to bring that into the conversation with a local business, I think is really important. So it's nothing new, right? It really isn't. It's not new at all.
And the final takeaway, we're running out of time, and I could chat for hours with you, sir, because I love talking sales and I love talking how this is part of the sales process. Final takeaway is, and I'm feeling it, have we hit bottom? Is legacy media now like newspapers? Can we take a breath and know that maybe we're where we're going to be for a while and we can just work on growing the business? I mean, the big declines, the big, huge hockey sticks, I'm not seeing those anymore, right?
Yeah, I think so. Look, with newspapers and print in particular, I would say newspapers and magazines probably have. We were seeing those huge double-digit declines, right? We're now in single-digit declines. In fact, I think what we're predicting for newspapers for 2024 is down about 4%.
Right.
Not great, right? But it's not down 14%.
Right.
So, that also, by the way, Mike, I think is driven by the fact there are fewer newspapers, right? So in some cases, they're not there to spend money with. So if you're a local publisher, you very well might be seeing, and we're seeing this with some of them, it's flattened or even some increases, some modest increases. So I think there is that rebound. I think the pendulum is swinging back a bit the other way, particularly as these folks get more sophisticated as marketers and understanding that, I need the power of some of the things that traditional media can do for me that's different than digital.
Jim Brown, president of Borrell Associates. Jim, if anyone has interest in getting these reports or learning more about being part of your local ad survey, they can reach out to you or the company, correct? How do they get a hold of you?
info@BorrellAssociates.com. We'd love to hear from you. Come to our website, BorrellAssociates.com. Mike, we do have detailed forecasts. We didn't talk a lot about that, but overall we're seeing increases in spending for next year for local. So it's not even across the board. So your market might be different than others, but if you'd like that information, reach out to us. Love to help you out.
But there's still a growth next year. I mean, the big takeaway was 4%, right, overall?
Actually, we're seeing overall local at 4.4% growth. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Jim, thanks for your valuable time. Really appreciate this. We'll bring you back in a few months when you bring out the next one, and keep up the good fight.
Great. Mike, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you for all you're doing for the industry as well.